You know, sometimes the most influential organizations, they aren't the biggest ones. They're the ones that just stick with a goal for decades.
Right.
And today we're taking a look at a whole stack of sources detailing the history and the legislative impact of the Nurses Organization of Veterans Affairs, NOVA.
That's right. For over 45 years, Nova has had this laser-like focus on improving the professional status of VA nurses.
Which, of course, improves the quality of care for veterans.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So our sources, they lay out what Nova calls its top 10 milestones. And our mission here is really to understand how these legislative victories didn't just, improve paychecks. They fundamentally embedded nurses into the VA's policymaking infrastructure.
This is so much more than a history lesson. It's like a blueprint for how focused advocacy can completely overhaul a professional role.
Hmm.
And what's really fascinating to me is that the battles they fought weren't just for salary. They were for mandated institutional power.
Yeah, we are going to track a series of these legislative wins that really show the shift from nurses just being, hired staff to becoming crucial, non-negotiable partners in policy and management.
Okay, so to get that, we have to start at the foundation.
We do. We have to start with making VA nursing economically competitive in the first place.
Okay, let's unpack this core issue. Because for you, the listener, if you're working in the VA today, that competitive salary you earn, it's a direct result of overcoming this huge systemic hurdle from, what, the 70s and 80s?
Exactly. Stagnant, centralized federal pay that just couldn't keep up with the local healthcare market. Before the landmark Nurse Pay Act of 1990, the VA was just bleeding talent.
So a nurse could train at the VA, get all this great experience.
And then walk across the street to a private hospital and immediately make substantially more money. The VA was just locked into these rigid federal pay scales. They completely ignored local costs of living.
That sounds like a terrible feedback loop. The VA trains the best, but can't keep them.
It was. So the Nurse Pay Act of 1990, it was pivotal. It established a system where local VA medical centers could finally offer salaries competitive with other healthcare facilities in their specific local market.
It put the power back in the local VA center's hands.
It did. And NOVA, of course, immediately moved to refine that. They needed to make sure it wasn't just a suggestion, but a legally mandated process.
Okay.
So you see subsequent legislation, like PL 102585, which formally gave medical centers the authority to go out and survey their local labor markets to figure out compensation rates.
So the pay wasn't based on what some federal government table said?
No, it was based on what the actual market demanded.
That's just crucial for staying relevant, especially in, high cost of living areas. But they didn't stop at pay. They went for institutional status right away.
And what's so fascinating is the strategy of doing it all at once. So alongside getting, say, premium pay for Saturdays, tuition reimbursement, recruitment bonuses.
All important stuff.
Very important. But they also secured this critical policy mandate. Early legislation required that the chief nurse be included on policy-making and fiscal committees within the facility.
Wow, so if you control the budget and the policy.
You control the direction of care. And that really sets the stage for the big one, the big economic and oversight package,
Yeah.
the Veterans Benefits and Healthcare Improvement Act of 2000.
That's the one that really locked in the accountability.
It did, but 2000 Act was comprehensive. It addressed pay issues for a lot of professions.
Yeah.
But for RNs, it created these deep, lasting safeguards. It reformed the survey process for locality pay, and, critically, it granted oversight of a medical center director's decisions on RN salaries.
With the authority to modify those decisions.
Yeah.
Wait, let's just stay on that for a second. How difficult was that politically to get Congress to mandate oversight of a local director's salary decisions? That sounds like a massive infringement on traditional executive power.
Oh, it was incredibly difficult. But it just highlights the realization that centralized checks were necessary. In some centers, you had local leadership that was actively undermining the spirit of the 90 Pay Act.
Just refusing to match market rate.
Exactly. So this victory meant that directors could no longer just unilaterally hamstring nurse compensation. There was an enforceable national oversight mechanism to make sure pay reflected the market reality.
Yeah.
It just shifted the power dynamic completely.
And on top of that shift, the 2000 Act mandated annual nurse staffing reports.
Yep, to track capacity.
And it required directors to consult senior nurse executives for patient care policies. So the nurses, they weren't just getting paid better. They were legislatively guaranteed a permanent influential seat at the policy table.
And that is the turning point, moving from competitive salary to mandated institutional power.
Which brings us to the next huge set of changes.
The investment in the nurse as an individual professional.
Precisely. Let's pivot to what I think is a huge aha moment for a lot of people. These sweeping legislative changes that just fundamentally altered education, retention, and retirement. And this all centers on the Veterans Affairs Healthcare Improvement Act of 2001.
The 2001 Act was a retention powerhouse. It permanently authorized the Employee Incentive Scholarship Program, or EISP.
And before this, the program was temporary, right? Sort of uncertain.
It was. Making it permanent was a signal that the VA views nursing education as a long-term strategic investment.
And the legislation, it also reduced the time nurses needed to work at the VA before they were even eligible for EIST, right?
It did, making it accessible much earlier in their careers.
Yeah.
But here's the real game changer, especially for advanced professional degrees. The legislation removed the fixed limits on how much money nurses could receive for school.
Up to the equivalent of 3 years of full-time study.
Right. So if you were looking to get, say, a doctorate or some specialized degree, this turned the VA into a major funding partner for your education.
That is a substantial, life-changing investment. And then, coupled with that, the Act permanently authorized the Education Debt Reduction Program, EDRP.
EDRP is that immediate relief valve. It allows the VA to help pay down a nurse's school debt up to a maximum of $44,000.
Wow.
Now, the total amount is important, but what's even more crucial is that the Secretary has the authority to adjust that cap.
To keep up with inflation and rising pay levels.
Yes, so the benefit stays relevant year after year.
Okay, so beyond education, there were also these major, really specific but powerful retirement improvements in 2001. Let's talk about FERS and sick leave.
What's so interesting here is how it acknowledges loyalty. The legislation gave VA nurses enrolled in FERS, that's the Federal Employee Retirement System, the ability to use their unused sick leave as part of their retirement calculations.
Okay, for anyone who's not familiar with federal retirement systems, why is that such an amazing benefit? Doesn't everyone get to do that?
Absolutely not. This was a huge win secured by NOVA. FERS is the system for employees hired after 1983. For most federal workers, when you retire, all that accumulated sick leave, it just expires. It's gone.
Wow.
This legislation allowed VA nurses to convert that accumulated time directly into service credit. It effectively boosts their total length of service for their retirement calculation. It's an immediate, tangible reward for career commitment.
And that translates directly into a better retirement payout. So they also addressed another really complex historical issue, the prorating of pre-1986 service.
Right. This is a bit complex, but it's so important for fairness. Before April 7th, 1986, the federal system was in this massive transition between the older retirement system and the new FERS.
Okay.
And part-time service that was performed before that date was often heavily prorated, which severely discounted the service time of nurses who might have worked part-time early in their careers.
So NOVA's legislation.
NOVA's legislation exempted RNs, physicians, and some dental techs from this prorating requirement.
So if you were a dedicated nurse serving the VA part-time back in 1985, NOVA fixed a complex federal rule to make sure your service counts fully toward your retirement today. I mean, that's an incredible level of attention to detail.
And finally, institutionally, the 2001 Act demanded that the Secretary and the Undersecretary for Health establish a nationwide policy on nurse staffing standards.
Not local guidelines, a national standard.
A national standard to prevent chronic understaffing. And to really show the recognition of nursing as a vital executive function, the top VA nurse in central office now has to report directly to the Undersecretary for Health.
That's a legislative recognition of executive parity. Okay, let's move on. Shifting focus now to work-life balance and getting rid of some of these, frankly, outdated restrictions that sound impossible today.
This next milestone, it really highlights just how archaic some of the old laws were. We're talking about the Veterans Healthcare Eligibility Reform Act of 1996.
Okay.
NOVA successfully championed this act, and it overturned a 50-year-old law that restricted full-time RN employment outside the VA.
A 50-year-old law restricting a nurse's ability to earn outside income. I mean, what was the thinking behind that?
The law was originally intended to, ensure full dedication, but in practice, it just severely hampered the earning potential and the flexibility of these highly trained professionals, especially when federal pay was lagging so far behind.
So getting rid of that restriction in 96?
It finally freed VA nurses to take on supplemental work or pursue other opportunities without penalty. It was a massive win for personal economic freedom.
That is such a memorable detail. It just shows the deep-seated bureaucracy NOVA was up against. And that focus on flexibility, it continued into the early 2000s, right? Focusing on preventing burnout.
Absolutely. By 2003, Senate Bill 2484 brought flexible scheduling options to the table, specifically as a recruitment and retention tool.
And this is where we start seeing these really innovative arrangements being authorized.
Yes, like 3 12-hour tours of duty for full-time work, or the option to work 9 months and then take 3 months off.
Those kinds of arrangements can fundamentally change whether you can work full time while balancing, family life or going back to school. It makes the VA a much more attractive employer.
And that bill also authorized executive pay for nurses, ranging from $10,000 to $25,000, which further recognized advanced skill and administrative responsibility.
Right.
But maybe the most crucial part of that 2003 bill, from a patient safety and anti-burnout perspective, was the mandate. It required the VA to certify to Congress that every VA facility has a policy designed to prevent nurses working more than 12 consecutive hours.
Or more than 60 hours in a week.
Right.
That's a legislative safety net. So Nova recognized that mandatory time off, it wasn't just about the nurses' welfare. It was about making sure patient safety wasn't compromised by someone who is just exhausted.
It turned a personnel issue into a hard legislated standard. And we also saw this continuous refinement of processes. Senate Bill 1156, also around 2003, required input specifically from VA nurses to improve appointment and promotion processes.
Which prevents management from just arbitrarily changing career paths without professional consultation.
Exactly. And it continued to ensure parity across titles. The 2001 Act made sure that licensed practical nurses, LPNs, also receive Saturday premium pay. It's just continuous granular legislative pressure.
Absolutely. That ongoing pressure really shows the need for constant vigilance. Okay, so let's use this final section to kind of step back and showcase the sheer breadth of Nova's influence, from historical recognition all the way to future professional growth.
We do often focus on the tangible, the economic benefits, but Nova's advocacy also achieved this really profound historical milestone, the Cadet Nurse Bill, H.R. 2663.
And this was actually initiated by a Nova nurse, right? Angela Bohannon.
It was. She saw an injustice and marshaled the organization's legislative muscle to fix it. This was signed into law by President Reagan, and it provided honorary veteran status to the cadet nurses who served during World War II.
That's such a powerful anecdote. It shows Nova uses its platform not just for its current members, but to honor the legacy of service, correcting an oversight that lasted for decades.
And looking toward the future, Nova continues to invest so heavily in its members' professional growth. The sources highlight that Nova recently became an ANCC-accredited provider of nursing continuing professional development credits.
That is huge. So that means they're a recognized professional development body. They're not just doing advocacy, they're providing certified career-advancing education.
Exactly. They've launched educational webinars specifically to help Nova nurses write their self-assessments for promotion. So they're making sure their members have the resources and the certifications they need to capitalize on the promotion processes.
That Nova itself fought to improve.
Yes, they're fighting for the rules
Okay.
and then providing the resources to win within those rules.
So what does this all mean for you listening? If we sort of synthesize this 45-year history, we see what, 4 massive legislative pillars?
I think so. You have competitive pay guaranteed by local market reality. You have comprehensive education and retention benefits like EISP and EDRP.
Then there's the mandated management input through policy committees, oversight of directors' salary decisions.
And finally, those essential work-life protections like flexible scheduling and the safety limits on consecutive hours.
It's an undeniable track record of legislative success. It transformed the job of a VA nurse from this rigid federal position into a highly competitive, professionally respected role.
It really did. And if you're interested in learning more about this impact or, finding ways to take part, Nova invites you to visit vanurse.org.
And before we wrap this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought based on the sheer volume of legislation we've just talked about.
Yeah, we've seen again and again that Nova frequently had to go back to Congress to mandate internal accountability. Things like requiring nurse input on patient care policies or needing Congress to certify staffing reports or even modifying a director's salary decisions.
Yeah.
So what does that consistent need for external legislative pressure tell you about the institutional barriers that can exist even when an organization's stated mission is excellent patient care?
It suggests that continuous granular legislative pressure might be the only way to ensure internal accountability.
And to maintain the professional status that has been so hard-won over the last 5 decades.
A crucial insight. The battle for better policy is never truly over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
We'll catch you next time.